What's going on, guys? Dan from SSG bringing you another Edison format deck profile. This time I'm profiling a counter fairy volcanic deck. Really interesting take here. Shoutouts to my boy Paul for showing me this deck list. It's a deck he's been working on for a while. A little help from Connor as well. Shout out to him. And it's a pretty interesting deck. Let's get right into it. With a full 3 copies of Bountiful Artemis. Of course, this is what makes us a counter fairy deck. Just being able to draw a card every time one of our counter traps resolves. It's just really powerful. It's just really good. There's a lot of good counter traps in the format. So we're going to play the full 3 copies of Artemis, as that's what makes us a counter fairy deck. Very powerful there. We have full 3 copies of Volcanic Rocket. This card just provides a lot of value for you. You're going to be able to add the Blizzard Accelerator from anywhere to your hand. It's going to be valuable. It's really important that this guy is also 1900 because this deck can kind of suffer with win conditions, as a lot of the slower decks can really suffer in this format at trying to actually kill the opponent when the time comes. I think Volcanic Rocket just proves to be very powerful, as it does a few different things for this deck. Gets some value, gets access to the Blaze Accelerator, which is powerful removal, and also we have a Beat Stick 1900, so very strong card there. Of course, we're going to be running the 3 volcanic shells. Card's just really good. We're going to have a lot of ways to abuse the discard, get rid of those extra shells that we get for value, and just make use of them. Card's really good, thins out your deck, and it does a lot for you. We have 2 copies of Cyber Dragon. I love Cyber Dragon in this type of controlling shell, because we can just kind of beat down and get over our opponent's stuff without actually committing our back row and our counter traps to do so. Once threats are actually resolved, this is a good way to just drop Cyber Dragon into play, start attacking our opponent's monsters, and try and get a +1 that way. Also just going to help you kind of just beat down. It's just going to be really good, and just actually close out the game. And this, in combination with the 1900 stick of Volcanic Rocket, will add up to 4,000, which can put a pretty fast clock on your opponent, and and a control shell, that's always a good thing. We have 2 copies of kycoo. We play a ton of removal in this deck, and whenever I have a lot of removal, I always look to kycoo, because being able to get that direct attack is very powerful, and being able to disrupt the opponent's graveyard is going to mean we're disrupting them in a lot of different ways, because we're countering their things, we're removing their creatures, and we're also attacking their graveyard. So kycoo really adds a new dimension to this deck, and whenever we can have good ways to easily clear the board and get our kycoo in, is exactly where this card wants to be. So we have the 2 copies of kycoo in the main board. I have 1 copy of Royal Firestorm Guards. It's kind of a pot of average for this deck, right? It puts 4 guys back, 3, hopefully, multiple copies of Shell and Rocket as well, and then we can just draw some cards that way. It's important that this guy's a monster, because we need win conditions in this deck. I mean, 1700 isn't the best body, but if you can have your pot of avarice potentially be a creature, that's something we'll take. And having just the 1 copy is just pretty good. I think it can be set up pretty early with the shells just adding each other over and over again, so pretty good card here. 1 copy Morphing Jar. We play a ton of trap cards, and Morphing Jars are going to be able to get insane value, especially on turn 1. We just set our whole hand, protect our back rows with a card like Solemn Judgment or Dark Bribe from Heavy Storm, and then Morphing Jars is going to draw us 5 cards. An incredible card. It's just really powerful. A lot of people don't play this card enough, and myself included. I mean, this is, I believe, the first time I've even included it in a profile, and that's kind of saying something, because I think it's extremely powerful, and we should just be adding this card to our deck more than we really are. There's a lot of ways to set it up and abuse it, so Morphing Jar is very strong. On to spells. 2 copies of the Blaze Accelerator. It's just searchable. The reason why we have 2 is because if we have 1 in play already, our Volcanic Rockets don't actually get value, and we do have, I believe, a total of 6 discard traps, which we want to have value for. If we don't have access to the shells, we want to just get these into our hand as +1s off the Volcanic Rocket, and just have them for discard. So I do like having access to the 2. I started at 1, but I realized we really should have the second one for value, just to make sure those Volcanic Rockets get their Stratos type effect. And it's also just a solid card. If we have the shells in our hand, we're going to be able to remove our opponent's creature at the cost of basically nothing, as the shells replace themselves. So 2 copies of the Blaze Accelerator. I like for 1 copy of Smashing Ground. I like this card in general. It's just a good way to remove threats, and if you don't have the short of the shell and Blaze Accelerator package going, then this is just an easy way to remove a creature, and I like to just play 1 copy. The last spell in the deck, we have 1 copy of MST, just standard removal. Onto the traps. We have a bunch of counter traps, but to start, 3 copies of Dark Bribe. This is probably just probably the better, more flexible counter trap in the format that you can play multiple copies of, and it's just going to do a lot of good things. The draw downside doesn't really matter a lot of times. If you have the Bountiful Artemis in play, you will also get to draw a card, and that's kind of just a positive exchange for you in general. So being able to just stop key specific things is very powerful, and I've played this card as a one of in a lot of my decks, and especially my combo decks and my control decks. Like, those decks just do a lot, and just being able to push your plays through while also protecting your back row from a card like Heavy Storm, really flexible card. And a lot of the times you don't really mind going down a card for the power that this card can give. If you're stopping a card like Future Fusion for the price of giving them a +1, like, who really cares at that point, right? The Future Vision would potentially just end the game when it resolves. So the Dark Bribe has been very good for me, and I, of course, am going to play all three in a kind of Fairies type deck. One of the cards that kind of holds this deck together is 3 copies of Divine Wrath. It's a counter trap, it's a discard outlet, which is 2 things we want in this deck. And Divine Wrath's really powerful. Being able to interact with monster effects is a very strong thing to do in any format, but in Edison, I think it's a rare effect that we really can do that. We can, of course, stop cards like Caius, like Deep Sea Diva, from getting out on the board and doing their thing. Very powerful card, and we're going to discard Shell for value, just getting free +1s. We can discard our Blaze Accelerator if it's in our hand and add it back later. Really strong card. I like the Divine Wrath. It does a lot for this deck. And the other discard trap we play, 3 copies of Raigeki Break. We just want to remove the creatures, get them out of the way. Of course, we're going to need to have those shells in hand as well as the Blaze Accelerator to hand, so we can just get those value discards. And this card is just excellent in the format, so I've been liking Raigeki Break. We're going to play all 3 of those. I have 3 copies of Dimensional Prison, just more removal, right? It helps get your kycoos into play, and also just lets you beat down with those rockets, which is really important, having them get those double value of like it beating down as well as providing card advantage. Really strong, and we're going to have 3 deep prisons to sort of facilitate those things. We then have 2 copies of Bottomless Trap Hole, just standard removal. Everyone knows this card is excellent in Edison. We then move on to 2 copies of 7 Tools of the Bandit. It's just a solid like counter trap, right? It's like a lot. I think like I like to main board to account for cards that decks that have trap cards, because I think there's not really that many decks that play no traps. We're gonna see even like Fairies like play minimum like 4 or 5 traps, you know, like, so this card is gonna be like mostly alive against like the majority of the format. So let's just main board it. It's going to be a counter trap that brings our counts up. I could see going down to 1. That would make a lot of sense as well. But I like the 2 as it can be really impactful in the matchups where, you know, like Gladiator Beast, where you want to be able to actually interact with a card like War Chariot. So 2 copies of the 7 Tools of the Bandit. We move on, 2 copies of Royal Oppression. We're a control deck, right? We're really only special summoning when we have Cyber Dragon. So this card is going to be great for us. We're going to be able to protect it with Dark Bribe. It's going to be excellent, and it's going to negate our opponent's stuff, which is a very powerful thing to be doing here. Moving along, we have more removal in the form of Mirror Force, of course, as well as Torrential Tribute. Very strong removal pieces. We're going to want them in most of control decks. We have the copy of Solemn Judgment, very powerful. That is a counter trap, of course. Very powerful card in general, so we're going to run that. Of course, we have the 1 copy of Trapdustshoot. Would not be an SSG profile without it somewhere. It's a control deck, so I like to put in the main board this time. Very powerful card. Let's open it and be better than our opponent. And then 1 tech slot I kind of wanted to add in to see how it would work, and it's been okay so far. I have the 1 copy of Magic Drain. Cards look really strong in simplified board states when our opponent doesn't really have many options in hand. They're not going to have the spell card to discard, right? Because like a lot of spell lineups don't even look that long unless they're playing like a dedicated like combo deck with like a bunch of draw spells and trade-ins and all like that. Like, of course this card isn't going to be good against something like dragons, but I think in in control matchups, like where they're just going to try and resolve like a big heavy storm or like some sort of big card or effect that we need to cancel out and negate, it's just going to be there. And in the simplified board states, it's going to be excellent because they won't have the card to discard. So it's kind of a tech. I like the card a lot. I played it a lot as a kid, and just wanted to try it out. I think it's been pretty solid so far. And moving on, we have the extra deck here. Just a simple extra deck. I'm not going to go deep into it. Just Stardust and chimeratech. We're going to need Starlight Road if we have any. And then we're also going to have chimeratech for the Cyber Dragon. So probably 3 of each of these just to get your extra deck started. We have in the sideboard 3 copies of DD Crow. Of course, we're going to just get a lot of value to our hand. If we're drawing a lot of cards, we want to be able to use those cards, and DD Crow is a good way to kind of like take a -1 to really interact with our opponent and use the advantage we gain in a meaningful way, and I like the 3 DD Crows in the side for that reason. Electing to play 2 copies of Snowman here. I just like the additional removal. I think it's just very good. I think it can kind of stall out in a deck like this. We need defense that can kind of last a while. Card's just really good against Alias and things like that. Yeah, just solid card. I like the 2 Snowmans. 3rd copy of Kycoo. It's just going to be unbelievable in the matchups where we want it. So we're going to play the Kycoo. The 3rd Kycoo is just going to be excellent, right, against cards against decks like Value Turbo. So we have the 1 copy of Kycoo to round out the playset. We have 2 copies of Lightning Vortex. Card's excellent. I mean, we're going to be able to have Volcanic Shell, and it's going to be awesome, right? So 2 Vortex, and as well as the Volcanic Rockets, adding those, getting that extra value to hand with the Blaze Accelerator bezel +1. Just having the additional card to discard for Lightning Vortex is just unbelievably powerful. So I think this card's just going to be really good in any deck that can facilitate that extra card, and very good here. We can even mainboard it if we wanted to. On to traps. 3 copies of Pulling the Rug. Yes, because most of the time it's a 2 of, but this time it's a 3 of, because if we do draw it in the early parts of the game with the Bountiful Artemis, it's going to be a back-breaking play against something like a Caius. They try and Caius your Artemis, you chain this, bam, it's a complete +1, kind of blows them out of the water. It's going to keep your hand going, right, drawing extra cards. It's a counter trap that is very, very impactful in the matchup where you want it, so I like to play the 3 copies of Pulling the Rug in the side. I have 1 copy of Trap Hole as more removal. We have 1 copy of the 7 Tools of the Bandit, really strong against Gladiator Beast. I just want this card in that matchup. I'm sure you can find other matchups where you want it as well, so we want the 1 copy here in the side. We have 1 copy of Starlight Road to just protect against Judgment Dragon, Geyserist, things like that. And then we have the last card in the deck in the sideboard, 1 copy of Dust Tornado, just additional removal. It's going to be pretty solid. I mean, it's a solid card you want to be side decking. So that is about it, guys. Let me know what you guys thought about the deck in the comments section below. I think this deck is really interesting. When I first saw it, when Paul showed me the deck initially, quite a while ago, I thought the deck was pretty sweet. It does a lot of cool different things. So let me know what you guys thought about the deck in general. I think the deck does a lot of awesome things and just kind of like controls the game in a very unique way, right? Counter Fairies, like, not always the thing you would think that would be powerful in Edison format, but this deck really controls the game well, and it's just powerful. And we get to play sweet card like Bountiful Artemis, and the counter traps in this format are very good. So that is about it, guys. Without further ado, this is Dan V from SSG, signing out.